interviewing for the Hollywood Times.
Awesome.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get started.
Good work.
Let's jump in. Now you built a career as an Emmy award-winning filmmaker, and you're often referred to as America's biographer. Now, how did you first get started in filmmaking? Did you notice you were like interested in making movies when you were a kid? And what has inspired you to tell stories through documentaries?
Yeah, I never set out to be a filmmaker. I'm actually, sort of a songwriter first.
Mhm.
Songwriting is my first love. Still do a lot of it.
Mhm.
But commercial success is really tough in that industry. And for some foolish reason, I thought maybe making films would be easier. But I set out to make a documentary, and I started doing some research. I'd done some music videos for some bands I managed in college when I was
Mhm.
undergrad and law school, and I said, I knew I didn't have the skill set, particularly at the time, to make something scripted. So I said, well, let me try a documentary and start doing some research. And it seemed like the key to documentaries really was finding a great story. I mean, when I got involved in documentary filmmaking, technology got to a point where iPhone cameras weren't quite as good as they are now, but you had the DSLRs coming on the scene. You had Final Cut with nonlinear editing. So pretty much anyone had the technology and a lot of people had the capabilities to make something. But really, it came down to, can you find a story worth telling? And then can you make that story compelling enough that the world wants to watch? And so I made my first film as a short. It was not too ambitious. It was 7 minutes long, about a little boy who played t-ball and had Down syndrome and has
Mhm.
Down syndrome. A kid named Jacob lives in Floydstown, Indiana, and I caught the hearts and minds of some people, and got some nominations, won some awards, and decided it was really rewarding. I mean, like anything else that's difficult, it's tough in the process, but when it's done, it's like, oh, we made a baby. It was
Mhm.
cool, and to see the world react, and to see it become emotional, and see people care about the story as much as the family we made the story about cared. It was addicting, and so I sort of set off from there to start telling more stories because I just really enjoyed the process, and then of course, along the way, hopefully I've gotten better at it, but also been able to work with some of the best in the world and share some of the most unique stories around.
Yeah, great. So it looks like you really, you set out to find these stories and really like based on like the reaction that you got, not just from the people you were telling the stories, but from, others who could probably resonate with it. That's what, really drew you to to continue for sure. Did you ever have like a mentor that really helped shape your approach to storytelling?
Um, that's a really great question. Actually, it's probably the only area in my life and business that I didn't have a mentor at all.
Oh.
Um, I just was able to, based on what I learned from my mentors in business and music and other things, I think I just was able to port the skill sets over. I didn't have any contacts, so I didn't have anyone, and no one would take my call because I was nobody.
Mhm.
And So I really, all I did was try to surround myself with people who I admired, people who were so good at what they do. Um, I couldn't hope to do, to do cinematography as well as they did, or to edit as well as they did. And by the way, most of those guys I worked with on my first few documentaries, I still work with now. I mean, 15 years later, I just surround myself with a group of great people. I think one of the secrets is, great people make great documentaries. I imagine crappy people probably make crappy documentaries. I don't know. I don't work with any of them. But I just was able to take the skills I had learned from doing other things and bring it over and just find the most talented people around and convince them to work with me. And so now I have I've gained many mentors along the way. Most of them actually haven't been in the film world, but so much of what you learn about the rest of life and business and music and everything else is just it's portable because it's real life we're talking about, particularly in the documentary space.
Yeah, definitely. And well, I mean, congratulations on having, three documentaries. You got the greatest of these, When My Soul Speaks, the Liza Nicholas, live on Broadway, and Birsha, they were all picked up by Amazon Prime. So three of your films, they're on Amazon Prime. So, they're gonna be watched by, people all over the world now. What does this milestone mean to you specifically? Like how does streaming knowing that like these films that you created are now on such a like popular like streaming platform, they're going to be watched by so many different people all over the world. Like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, look, you make these things so they can be seen. The thing that is the most discouraging thing is that you can make a film that wins a bunch of awards, critics love it, people love it, the initial premiere audiences love it, but the world isn't seeing it. And
Mhm.
so it's really nice that, with a platform like Amazon that's, kind enough and been good enough to us to pick these up and share them with the world. I've already started getting, they launched today. I've already started getting feedback from people who are seeing them. And of course, Amazon has its own algorithms and everything else. But, the real goal of making these films is so they inspire people, they inspire change, they show people that, something that's possible they didn't think was possible, or inspire them to do something new. And that's, people, that doesn't happen if people don't see them. So I'm super excited that, it's a new chapter. These things that we worked on so hard on for usually over a year, sometimes years at a time. Now the world can see them as well.
Yeah, definitely very exciting. Now let's start with the greatest of these. What drew you to Mr. Bruce and the work of City of Refuge, and what did you hope audiences would take away from that story?
Yeah, I was introduced to Bruce by a few friends, and then I read his book. That's called Trust First, and
Mhm.
he's a faith-based guy. I'm a believer as well, and just what he said in his book just resonated so much with me. It's so much of what he does, really starts and ends with, with the gospel, with the what Jesus actually did, not what he said to do, what he actually did. And so many of us, myself included, as a Christian, I try to live my life in a great way, but I fall short in many ways. And to see
Mhm.
someone like Bruce, who uprooted his family, moved into the worst neighborhood possible, and has stayed there for over 30 years and helped thousands of people change their lives. That to me is it's such an awe-inspiring example of the action that I think so many, whether you're a Christian or a believer, a spiritual person or not, I think it's many of us admire that type of faith and that type of action, and just to see it in action was unbelievable. One of the most incredible stories I've ever been able to tell, and I can't wait to see what else Bruce will do, because he's a force of nature.
Yeah, and so you mentioned that, you yourself, you're a believer as well, like you have your own relationship with God. Have you always been a believer? And does having, faith and like, believing in something, greater than yourself, obviously like as most Christians see it, has that helped you like throughout this, difficult journey of filmmaking and, trying to like really like make a name for yourself in an industry that can be very difficult and, can have like only like very few really make it in?
Yeah, so I mean, yes, I have been a believer my whole life. Certainly, like I think most believers, you question your faith, and then that's what makes you stronger, and
Hmm.
you have more questions than answers sometimes.
Hmm.
But I just all I try to do is I try to obviously leave the world better than I found it. Not always successful with that, but I try to. And then when I find stories, like, well, all three of these stories really, but a story like Bruce's, if I can share it with as many people as possible, and if even one person sees, like, I don't expect everyone who watches the movie to uproot their family and go move into the poorest neighborhood in town and start the same thing Bruce did. That's not the point. We don't need. I mean, we do need a million more Bruces, but the whole point is, I hope this inspires everyone to say, oh, what am I not paying attention to that I could be good at, that would actually make a difference in my community or in my neighborhood, or even in my home. I mean, so many of us get so inspired to go change the world and fly across the world to Africa, and we neglect what's in our own backyard or in our own home or in our own community. And so my hope is that people see that and notice it. I think it is a. I think filmmaking is a tough industry, but I don't know many industries that aren't tough. It's just a different type of industry, and I think at the end of the day, all I try to do is find something that I find interesting. And so far, thankfully, a lot of the world has found those same things interesting. But I really focus on fascinating people, and fascinating people. As human beings, we have a deep desire to connect. And so when we focus on the people first, the stories tend to come out great, because you learn a lot about these other people, but it really teaches you the most about yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And now, with your your other work, When My Soul Speaks, the Liza Nicholas stories. So she shares some really like personal moments in her life. what was the biggest challenge in like translating such, such an intimate, like such intimate feeling, such like personal, like, difficulties that she overcame? Like, what was like, was it challenging translating, such intimate moments, into a documentary experience, into a documentary?
Yeah, so Lisa Nichols, first of all, is again just another force of nature. And so I met Lisa years ago when she was out on the speaking tour after she had done a lot of stuff with The Secret and Chicken Soup for the Soul. We became friends. We've done a lot of work together over the years. And, we were trying to figure out, she has a really great audience in the sort of personal development world, but anyone who meets Lisa is better off for having met Lisa. And so one of our goals was how do we get more of the world to pay attention to Lisa that isn't looking in the personal development sort of self-help world.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I had done one Broadway show before as a one-man show with Rudy, the football player, and one night only show. And I came up with the idea. I proposed it to Lisa, and she was excited by the idea. And she said yes. I think she might have regretted saying yes after that for a little while because then the work starts.
Yeah.
I also, again, I stay in my lane. I know what I think I can pull off and what I can, what kind of team I need to do it. So I reached out to a friend of mine named Riaz Patel, and Riaz, ended up co-directing the show with me and writing the show with Lisa. And I just said, look, do what you do. I know Lisa is one of the most compelling personalities on earth. I would love for her to be as raw and vulnerable as possible. And thankfully she was. But I've noticed when you give most people a big stage, they have certain things that they want to share. They
Mm-hmm.
want to they want to put on the record their way from their point of view. And I'm really thankful Lisa sort of let it all out and shared a lot of things she'd never shared publicly before. And the show was is mesmerizing, and because of her vulnerability, her rawness, but she's also done the work for 30 years of being one of the most sought out professional speakers in the world. What I think surprised all of us is none of us knew how great of an actress she was. We knew she could command the stage as a motivational speaker, which part of that is I guess performing in a way. But we were all blown away that what a great actress she was, and I can't wait to see after people see this what other opportunities come her way as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now in your third film, in Brisa,
Brisa,
you're
yep.
Brisa, yeah, you're telling the story of a survivor who like on her journey towards fighting for justice, she's really able to help influence and change child protection laws across Latin America. I think that we're living in a time right now where there's a lot of talk about how, not just in Latin America, but all over the world, we're not doing enough to protect children. Children, we're not doing enough to protect them. Like, we keep hearing stories every day about how, we like we want particular attention brought more to children. Did you feel like, or what responsibility did you feel while telling such a powerful and just deeply personal story?
Yeah, I mean, when I was introduced to Brisa by my friend Brian Norton, I had done multiple documentaries on anti-human trafficking all around the world,
Mm-hmm.
including the documentary that is the true story behind The Sound of Freedom, the blockbuster hit.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was introduced to Brisa and my friend Brian, who had been involved in a lot of those other stories, said, "Hey, this is a very different type of story. This is sort of survivor led."
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about it was that. Well, first of all, Brisa is an amazing human being, and I think the thing that says the most. I mean, if you just look at the bullet points of her story, from being sexually assaulted and being suicidal because she was a kid and
Yeah.
she was taken advantage of by a family member, which is often what happens. And then deciding she wanted justice, and then the Bolivian government, and it happens in a lot of other places, and it happens in America a lot of times too. To
Mm-hmm.
two victims, she was re-victimized essentially by the entire justice system. But for that to not break her, but not only not to break her, for her to decide that she was so unhappy with the way the system treated her, she wanted justice. But actually, even more importantly, the thing that I think actually really drives her is that she didn't want anyone else, any other child, any other woman, any other person to be treated the same way she was. So she fought hardest for them she was just the example. And so to go to law school with her husband, then decide they're going to file a case and sue the country of Bolivia in the Inter-American Court, which is like harder to get into than the Supreme Court of the United States. This like governs all the Latin American countries basically, or most of them that are in that where the treaty is ratified. And to become a lawyer, to win the case, to be offered reparations and to turn them down because saying, I'm not here for money, I'm here for change, and then recommending that the government change, I think it was 13 laws, and everyone said, you can't do that. And she said, well, I'm going to tell them what I think is true. And I believe they ratified all 13 of her recommendations into laws that are now spreading around, I think something like over 20 Latin American countries. I mean, it's a once-in-a-lifetime story, and Brisa is such a resilient, incredible person. She's gone on to help thousands of others who have been, who have been victimized. And I mean, I don't know how you don't tell that story. I think the key to the stories like that, because they're heavy, it's hard to get people to watch them, and I understand that. There's, I usually don't go looking for content like that myself. But if you can find a way to tell it, with a person like Brisa, with an outlook like she has, that has more hope in it than it has hurt. There's plenty of hurt, but she does it for the hope. It comes across on the screen, and I can't wait for more people to see it. I think that's a life-changing movie.
Definitely life changing. And yeah, you did mention that a lot of your work has focused on human trafficking, the exploitation of children. What by like working on these stories, what would you say is the most important thing that you learned about child trafficking or child exploitation, whether like what that looks like, and what do you hope most adults like, what should most adults pay attention to when it comes to protecting children?
Yeah, if you feel like something is off, you should probably ask some questions, because people who are being trafficked or abused, the abusers aren't dumb most of the time. They are taking advantage of of people in a position to be taken advantage. So a trafficker or an abuser will say something like, hey, don't make sure you don't ever tell anyone about this. They'll be really mad at you, and they'll groom you to where you feel like it's your fault and it's a secret and you can't tell anybody. And so you have to be able to get past those layers. I would say a couple things I learned. I mean, I have kids. My kids are 21, 18, and almost 15 now, but I did a lot of this work when they were younger. And one of the things I realized is that thankfully I'm a parent that has a trusting relationship with my kids. So they can come to me with anything. And I tell them, hey, look, first of all, don't send nude pictures of yourself to anyone. Second of all, if you do make a mistake doing that or anything else, come to me and your mom first, because we care about your future more than anyone else in your life. So I think, and I told my kids, hey, I expect you to make mistakes because I still make mistakes. So when you make a mistake, come talk to me. It doesn't mean mistakes. I mean, life has consequences. Mistakes do have consequences. Doesn't mean it's not going to have a consequence. But I again, in this case, my mom or your mom and myself care more about your future and how we can mitigate those consequences, for your best future possible. What happens is a lot of kids that conversation isn't had. Either they don't have someone they can trust, whether it's a school counselor or a parent, because some people are abused by their parents, right? But they don't have someone they can go and talk to, and they become extorted, and they feel so ashamed. They don't, and the people. So the way a lot of this works in a lot of places, it's much easier to traffic a kid from a cell phone than it is to go buy a creepy white van and lurk around a school or whatever it is, right? So if you can convince a teenager or a man or a woman of any age that you're someone of the sex they're interested in and you're attractive to them, and it's pretty easy to see people who post a lot about how bad their life is or how much their parents hate them, or there's a lot of these signs. They didn't make the team or they didn't make the cheerleading squad and they're down, and someone will sort of start sliding in their DMs and start building up their confidence and building a relationship with them, and it feels real, and really it's not the person in the pictures at all, and eventually they would typically try to start up some sort of sexual relationship or start sending pictures that aren't of them, and they'll get the kid or the other person on the other side to send pictures that are of them, and all of a sudden they have compromising photos or videos of someone, and all of a sudden they find out instantly that's not who they thought it was. On the other end could be a whoever halfway across the world, and they'll start threatening, if you don't send me more pictures, if you don't send me videos, if you don't get on Zoom and do live acts I'm going to send this to your parents. I'm going to post this online. I'm going to send this to your principal or your school. You're going to be embarrassed. And if they have nowhere to go, no one to turn to when they made that mistake, which is, it's a human mistake. I mean, we all make mistakes, and if they don't
Yeah.
have anyone to go to, it often leads to massive depression and oftentimes suicide. So I think the thing I learned the most, it's a long answer to your question, but opening lines of communication. If you have a good relationship with an adult but or a kid, and you can establish with them a level of trust where you say, hey, look, if you make a mistake, you need to tell someone. You need to share that with someone so that they can help protect you. It's a really tough one. Like I said, hopefully a lot of parents can have that conversation. But the saddest part is, I don't remember the statistic, but it's a very high percentage of people who are sexually abused are abused by a family member. Whether it's a immediate family member or a distant family member, and it's really difficult. Another thing I learned is, you learn to tell your kids, in our family we don't have secrets, just surprises. Surprises have deadlines. If someone ever tells you to not ever tell me something, that means that they're trying to hurt you in some way. You need to tell me what that is. And so, again, it depends on the age and the stage and maturity of the person you're dealing with, but those are a few of the things I learned.
Yeah, very definitely very important. I think it's also something that a lot of experts, like have like people that directly work in this field have been like stressing for years. The abuse, like it isn't always what it looks like. It's not just some guy that's coming to a store and like taking someone. Like no, it starts by building trust, like, and it's built over time for sure,
And
definitely.
most parents don't know how to monitor a cell phone. Like you can be overbearing and not trust your kids at all, or
Hmm.
you can teach them right and wrong and monitor them. The sheriff I work with a lot, Sheriff Swanson says, he also says trust but verify. Like you should be checking your kids' web history, and they're probably smart enough to hide it. But like you should be involved in their lives to where they know. I mean, if you give your kid a cell phone and send them into the bedroom, that's the equivalent of sending them into a nightclub, an adult toy shop, a brothel, like all in one device, right? I mean, they can
Yeah.
find anything in the world, and any type of person is there. And
Mhm.
wherever people gather, so will people who want to take advantage of them. People who are trying to scam you for money, traffickers, all that. Wherever the people gather, that's where they're going to go. So now that's online, and that's a lot of that too. By the way, is in video games. If there's any communication inside of a video game, there's trafficking happening there. There's grooming happening there because there's two-way communication, and someone can try to convince you there's something or not. There's a lot of we did a story on a case that happened. A kid got sexually assaulted based on meeting someone on Roblox, and the kid was like 4 or 5 years old.
Oh
I mean, so
wow.
it happened wherever there's communicative boards, messaging. It happens. So you have to know that, which is a surprise to most people anyway, and start having those conversations earlier, awkward conversations earlier than you'd ever want to.
Exactly. Yeah, so many of your films, they really do deal with, difficult topics like, abuse, as we were talking about, homelessness, addiction and injustice. You were like, and we sort of like touched on this, but how do you balance, telling emotionally compelling stories while ensuring that the people of the center of them feel respected and accurately represented?
Yeah, that's easy because I approach them with respect. I'm here to tell your story.
Mhm.
I want to dig in with you so that we tell it accurately. But I start from a place of service and respect. I'm here to serve your story. I get to tell hundreds and hopefully over my lifetime thousands of stories. You have one. I respect that greatly, and so when I work with a subject, I often get accused of writing love letters to my subjects. That's like one of the critiques of my work. But I want you to know the person authentically, the way the person sees themselves. And everyone has blind spots. We'll call those out as necessary. But I just generally approach people with a servant's heart. Hey, I'm here to serve you in your story, and most importantly, the reason I try to tell. A lot of times people will tell me first, the very first notion, they're not really interested in telling their story, and that's really cool because they're not. That means they're not narcissistic egomaniacs for the most part, and most people aren't, thankfully. But what I tell them is like, hey, I don't want to tell this story for your sake. It's actually not about you. It's what can your story share and teach or inspire or help or protect someone else in the world from, or millions of people in the world. And then they're like, oh, well, that's different. I'd love to share my story for the purpose of helping other people. And well, that's what we're doing here. So that's how I approach it. How can we share your story in an authentic way that somehow inspires, helps, protects, lifts up someone else? And when you approach it from that level of respect, thank God I just never had an issue.
Yeah, definitely. And looking ahead, are there any like issues or stories that you feel are still very underrepresented that you would love to explore in your future documentaries?
Oh man, there's so much. I mean, one things that I was fortunate enough to judge the finals of Miss America last year,
Oh.
and the founder of Miss America, or the CEO of Miss America, said something to me that really stands out. And she said, she got into there was a bunch of people clawing for that, the intellectual property of Miss America and everything. I sort of asked her, just on the side, like, why why did you fight so hard for this?
Mhm.
And her answer surprised me, but it was inspiring to me. She said, Nick, America is about to turn 250 years old, and that was the same. Last year was about that time.
Mhm.
We're leaning into this year, and she goes, we're such a young country. We just don't have much Americana. We don't have much that's authentically ours. She said, I felt like if I didn't step in and protect Miss America, which is something that is uniquely and authentically, part of our history,
Mhm.
then who will? And so for me, it's not just obviously Brisa stories out of Bolivia, and I've told stories all across the globe.
Mhm.
I love authentically American stories too. I'm an immigrant to the country. I'm a citizen. My family came here for a reason. But I think preserving history authentically from directly from the mouths of those who lived it. That's why I love telling Larry King's story. That's why right now I'm working on the Blind Boys of Alabama's documentary. They've been an institution since 1939. I mean,
Mhm.
so almost 90 years, right? And so just it's an honor to be able to share history in a way that's exciting, entertaining, and inspiring to other people.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you worked with some really cool individuals. Like you worked with Gloria Stefan. She's you worked with her. Do you I mean, you made so many films now, and you obviously you're working with so many cool individuals, like a lot of well-known individuals. Do you get starstruck? Was there someone that you met that you were really excited about? Someone that you had been a fan of their work for so long? Like someone particularly you were like, oh wow, like I actually got to meet them and work with them.
There's been plenty over the years, but the one that I think will always be the number one is Dolly Parton. You know what I
Oh, right,
mean?
Dolly Parton. Yeah.
And
Mhm.
Dolly is unbelievable. She's every bit as kind and generous with her time and authentic as you could ever hope for. And as a songwriter, I mean, Dolly Parton wrote "I Will Always Love You" and "Jolene" in the same day by herself. Like as
I
a songwriter, I how do you can't beat that, number one. And number two, she's just a real deal, and she's so supportive and helpful of everyone. There will never be. I would guess there will never be an interview that will top the excitement I had interviewing Dolly Parton
Yeah, like I knew she wrote those songs. I had no idea she wrote them on the same day. That is
by
like
herself. Because
by
most of
her.
these songs are written by three, four, 10
Mhm.
people. Dolly sat down and wrote those both by herself.
That is incredible. I mean, not to mention she's so charitable. She's got her like reading foundation that sends books to children all over. Like
She's
she's
the
an
real deal,
incredible
man. She's
human.
authentically amazing, and it was an honor to interview her. And again, I've worked with so many people that thankfully you get used to it, and thankfully most people are really kind, so it doesn't. You don't have to get nervous. I mean, there's always a little bit of tension. Are they going to show up? They're going to show up on time. How's it going to work? Are they going to be kind? But thankfully, I mean, 99.9% of the people that I've worked with, that some of the biggest names in the world, have all been really kind and generous.
Great. Yeah, that's I think it's really exciting. Now, obviously, like you mentioned that you went to law school and then you started sort of working on film projects. I just feel like, there's a lot of people now, like so many people have like, these dreams of making movies or becoming a songwriter, musician, and singer. However, they're often maybe like they don't pursue it because it's hard, like it's a difficult field to break into and to make money into. So a lot of times people they will settle for lives that they feel aren't the ones that they should be living or the ones that they want to be living. What advice do you have for someone who perhaps is sitting at their corporate job right now? They might be making a cushy salary, they have a 401k, all that, but they don't feel as fulfilled as they would, following their true passion, which is becoming a musician or becoming a filmmaker. Like, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, well, first of all, I understand life gets in the way, and you have to be responsible. Most of us have whatever they are. I think that in a lot of cases, the older you get, the more responsibilities you have.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, I have more responsibility now than I did when I was in college or high school or element, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you have to be responsible with taking care of the things that you are entrusted with. But I would say if anyone feels that way and they feel called to do those things, find a little time to do them and start doing them. And it's like in songwriting. I have people all the time who will have a kid, or they'll say, "Hey, I wrote my first song." would you check it out? And I'll say sure, and I'll always encourage you, but how honest do you want me to be? And they usually will say, no, I want you to be honest. Say, okay, good. And I say, well, because the one thing I want to tell you is that, first of all, I know you're really excited about this song, but um, if you knew right now that you're going to work for the next 20 years to write another song, for instance, or make another movie or whatever, and this first one was the best one you're ever going to write, would you be excited or depressed? And they're like, oh, I'd be depressed. I'm like, exactly. So this first one's actually probably going to suck, but you got to start. And the more and then you got to keep going. You only get great at things by doing them over and over and over again and collaborating with people who are better than you. And it's a journey, it's a process. So start the process. Whatever that looks like for you, start the process and try to surround yourself with people who support that. As well as people who can mentor you in it, because again, filmmaking's been a weird one for me, but I'd like to say all the other mentors I've had in my life have probably cross-pollinated. I know they have, to allow me to have a successful film career, and perhaps it's because of the fact that they gave me so many ideas that weren't film-based. They were based on the world and business and other things, that it's allowed me to maybe stand out a little bit and look a little bit different. I don't know, but maybe.
Yeah, for sure. Life can definitely get in the way for all of us, especially as we get older, definitely. All right. Well, thank you so much. Hope you have a great day.
You too. Thanks. Take care.
All
Appreciate the
right.
help.